My name is Emily Motz, and this is my first essay for English Comp 1 entitled Forever a Cardinal. Home is more than a location on a map or a structure in which we grew up in. It is so much more than that. Home becomes a feeling, a picture engraved in our minds forever. It's a psychological snapshot filled with familiar sights, smells, sounds, and emotions. And if you're lucky enough, home is filled with beautiful memories. My hometown is the kind of town you overlook on a map because the font used to label it isn't bold enough. Waynesburg, Ohio is lined with small sidewalks, rows of corn, and familiar faces. It's the kind of place you don't know exists unless you come from it or know somebody who lives there. Waynesburg is one of 4 small towns that make up the Sandy Valley community, a community in which high school football is idolized even though we never win, and families stay in town for generations. It's within the boundaries of this community that I found myself. Coming from a small community means that I grew up with the same people from preschool all the way until graduation. It means I withstood snow and rain all fall to attend football games that I knew we were going to lose just to see my best friend cheer and another best friend play in the marching band. I woke up every morning and went to the same school every day for 13 years, located in the middle of a cornfield, to be surrounded by the same people every day. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it became all that I knew. Anything outside of rows of red and gray lockers, 113 familiar faces, and the bright stadium lights of Friday nights, and the warmth of people who were close to me, scared me. I was so sheltered into believing that life was non-existent outside of my small town, convinced that everyone I would meet in life would possess the same type of kindness I had grown accustomed to. And after moving to college, I realized how mistaken I was. Going into my freshman year of college, I was so excited to be at the University of Mount Union. I was starting a new chapter in my life, growing up, and making steps in the right direction to establish my future career. I enrolled as a criminal justice major with a minor in pre-law, and also was a student enrolled in the honors college there. I joined a sorority, put in lots of volunteer hours, and worked a full-time job on top of being a full-time student. I was convinced that I was going to be the first in my family to make it out of the small-town Ohio kind of lifestyle, and escape the common blue-collar job fields that they had almost all fallen into. I became bitter because I was surrounded by students who got handed everything they asked for on a silver platter. My upbringing had made me independent and hardworking, qualities which most of my peers lacked. While I was thankful that I had to work for what I had, I started to despise where I came from because it was so different from everyone else. The cornfields I once loved, I now dreaded. The streets I would watch so many familiar faces pass through, I now despised. I wanted to do something extraordinary with my life, travel and explore something nobody in my family had done due to getting married and starting families too young. However, college wasn't as easy as it seemed, and after being diagnosed with depression, finding a purpose and being there was hard. I felt as though I had all these big dreams, but they served as pointless reminders that I'd never achieve them. Surrounded by people who expected me to be this picture-perfect image of a sorority girl at an expensive private school, which was not who I was cut out to be. I found myself returning home more and more. Once a week turned into every weekend, and these visits oftentimes involved me making it a point to drive past my old high school at least once. Even though it was the middle of winter, I could almost feel the chill of the crisp autumn air and the yelling of voices in the stands, saying Cardinals swat the Hornets, as if I was once again 16 and feeling alive. As my freshman year of college continued, I found myself beginning to question things more and more. Was I ever going to be happy at Mount? Was I going down the right career path? Was I making friends with the right people? The more and more I questioned things, the more and more I returned home trying to find answers and trying to find myself. My family provided as much love, support, and advice as they could as I slowly made the decision to transfer colleges and change my major. These choices, coming from someone who has always stayed on a very straight path of what I thought my life should look like, were very difficult. My future looked fuzzy for the first time for as long as I could remember. I'd always heard about friends and family changing college majors and potentially transferring colleges, and growing up, teachers and professors always told me that it's normal to change a few times. But I never thought I would become someone who wasn't sure of what they wanted to do with their life. Throughout my school years, I've had many remarkable teachers. 2 of these teachers have really stood out in my life and have given me so much valuable comfort and advice when it was needed. As the thought of switching to becoming an education major began to cross my mind, I returned home and turned to these teachers as mentors. Mrs. Emily Lewis was my 6th grade English teacher and my 7th grade science teacher, and remained a huge role model in my life from then on. After reaching out to her, she invited me to have lunch with her and discuss the teaching field and her thoughts and opinions on what this career has to offer. As we sat down at the restaurant, our conversation began as just catching up. I explained to her my college experience and how I began to question my life path. She stepped in and began to tell me that she went through the exact same thing in college. Enrolling as a zoology student, she had never pictured herself becoming an educator all these years later. Once we were on common ground, she began telling me all of the many pros and not so many cons of being an educator. She discussed pay scales, school districts, subject areas, and levels of education available. After an hour and a half, I was sold. I knew then that my passion for helping others could be put to good use by becoming a high school history teacher. Though not as glamorous or as exciting as being in a courtroom prosecuting criminals, an educator would bring me much more happiness than being a lawyer ever would. She and the other very influential teacher, Mr. Carey Reason, both invited me to complete observation hours in their classrooms at my old school. This is where I learned so much more about the field and was once again reassured that this is where I belong. I am now a student at the University of Akron studying AYA education, and I have noticed such a change in my happiness since being here. My life-changing moment didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen in some big city I'd always dreamed of moving to. My decisions were made in my tiny, cornrow-filled, can't-be-pointed-out-on-a-map hometown, where high school football is the most exciting event of the year and families have known each other for generations. My comfort in times of hardship didn't come from new people I met at college or professors who easily forgot my name. It came from family and friends I've had for years, and teachers who knew me as a little girl who always raised her hand first in middle school. So while it's okay to dream big, home will always be where the heart is. Home to me is tiny Sandy Valley, Ohio, where you can leave the area and the high school, but you'll forever be a Cardinal. Thanks.